So I'm going to give you a brief background of what the TLRU is. And sorry, I'm just going to do that, if you don't mind. Yeah, okay. We'll just use that screen for now. It just seems to be looping too much. Okay, so the Technology Localization Implementation Unit, or TLRU as we have it on the screen, is a program that's funded by the Department of Science and Technology. It was established in 2012, and the idea behind the program was the country was going into this huge infrastructure rebuild program, and in 2008 we established what we call the Competitive Supply Development Plan. The Competitive Supply Development Plan said, how do we get South African industry to become inclusive in this infrastructure rebuild program, which at that stage was quoted to be around 650 billion rands. So the Department of Science and Technology, together with the Department of Public Enterprises and the Department of Trade and Industry, said, let's look at how we can use technology to enhance the capability and competitiveness of the South African supply base so that they can participate in the program. That gave rise to the program TLRU in 2012, where we said, let's start assisting South African manufacturing companies. So all of this is a little bit out of context in what we're speaking at the moment, but it will explain what came about and brought about this partnership that we formed with SASCI. So about 2 years ago, or 18 months ago, I think, yeah, more or less 18 months ago, the DST said, how do we create a pool of science and engineering students so that when there's a need for qualified personnel, they are available to industry. And one of the things why I'm passionate about the program, because I am a product of the old Technicon system, and we used to call it in-service training when I was in Technicon. You now call it work integrated learning. But I used to sit on some of the advisory boards of the engineering faculty, and there was this push by the engineering faculty to move towards a 3-year degree at a University of Technology because they couldn't place their students and they needed to get the numbers out. Unfortunately, that's what drives funding nowadays, is numbers. I was totally against it because what differentiates a student out of a University of Technology as opposed to a student out of a university. A student out of University of Technology has that 1 year of experience that makes them more marketable, that makes them easier to move into industry and to add value to industry. So when the DST came to me with this program and said, we would like you to initiate this program where we support students who are studying towards a science and engineering qualification at a University of Technology and place them into industry for the 1 year practical training that they need to go, I was absolutely excited because it means that we could now support the universities of technology without them having to worry about their numbers, because we could place the numbers for them. Because the DST would also fund the program. And that's when the partnership started, because suddenly the DST gave us this massive budget, and I'm not going to quote the numbers now, but then he said, you need to implement this program. And the first year we had to place 100 students. We thought, shikes, how are we going to do this? To place 100 students into industry and to manage it would require 5 project managers. So we said, no, this can't work. And that's when I ran into Shakil and said to Shakil, is there a body that exists where we can work together and you help us to place students in industry? But we have the industry partners and you have the students. So how do we bring this all together? And this partnership started in about January last year when we started to speak about it, and about June last year is when we started to implement it. So we placed 100 students, I think it's 101 students in our first year, in 37 companies, if I remember correctly, utilizing over 9 institutions nationally. And hopefully the presentation gets going now, and I'm going to skip through the slides because I know we're running out of time. So let me just try and get to the slides that are important. So we approach, so if I go on to this slide here, well, what the TLRU does, we worked with over 140 companies nationally. Those are companies where we implement technology assistance packages at. And what we said to these companies, as part of being a recipient of government funding for your technology interventions, we would like you to host at least 2 students per company. And when we started it, we thought there's going to be a lot of problems because it's the first time we're going into something like this. How do we handle payroll? How do we handle disciplinary issues? How do we ensure that the students are being mentored properly, are being given the right type of training? But surprisingly to us, we placed students in over 5 provinces last year. And the companies were absolutely committed. We obviously, in the first year, we had some teething problems, you know, where contracts were not signed, where students didn't understand their role, where companies didn't understand their role. But working together with SASCI, and I'm going to say SASCI because that includes all the University of Technology's cooperative education departments, we managed to get past the teething problems, to ensure that the system was working. Because effectively, the cooperative education departments at the universities of technology do this on a daily basis. We didn't have the experience to implement a WIL program. But they had the people who could do the workplace approval, to have a mentor that worked with the students and ensure that the students had a mentor at the company and do the regular visits. I mean, I only have one project manager, and that's Busi, who's the ombudsman for my program. And she's like a bulldog with a bone in her mouth when she gets something going. And she's been on Shakil's case a couple of times on things that didn't happen properly. She's been on some of the University of Technology's cases because the guys didn't sign their contracts or there was no standardization in the contracts. But you know, you need somebody like that to take this program by the scruff of the neck. And what we have achieved over the time is that we've had a standardization in the way we implement it. Because what's the worst thing for a company is that you have students from maybe 3 or 4 different universities of technology, and suddenly if you don't have standardization, they have to deal with students differently or deal with the University of Technologies differently. So we wanted to avoid that, to avoid confusion. And I can tell you now that the companies have seen benefit, because companies who didn't want to pay for these students initially because they said they don't add value, you know, that was the problem with placement, are now absorbing these students after they finish their 1 year of internship, and we're calling it an internship program at the company. I can tell you that the demand currently is for around 160 students, which I can only place 120 with the budget I have. So there is a demand out there. So don't get it wrong. Don't be negative. Don't be despondent, because there is a demand out there. All we need to do is create the awareness that there are these students, that they can add value to their company. And I can tell you that in some of the companies where the students have worked, because what we've ensured is that they work on real projects, which we are implementing, that they become part of the capacity, because then they work on situations where the management of the company can see what value the students bring, where they can take the knowledge that they gain at the University of Technology, the theoretical knowledge, and implement it in a practical environment to show that the company owners that what they're learning at the college, once implemented under a mentorship, can add value to their company. And therefore we've had such a good success rate in the students being absorbed by industry. Now what I want to show you is just go through a few graphs of what has happened with the program. And I'm going to... So what you see on the screen is the kind of engineering disciplines that we've been placing students in. So it's mechanical, industrial, electronics, electrical, civil, metallurgical students as well. And in most times we ensure that the students must be South African citizens, because the program is using taxpayers' money. We want the students who are part of the taxpayers of this country to benefit from it. And that's what we've had a few foreign students that we've placed, but they've been very minimum. I think there was about 3 in the program in total. But the main benefit has been to students who are South African citizens. And one of the things we're trying to ensure is that these students have finished their S4, because we don't want the back and forth things to become a problem for them. Um, and obviously, when we place a student, we ensure that they've registered for their P1 and P2 at the university. That's a prerequisite. So there's a lot of paperwork that goes into it. There's a three-way contract that's signed between the student, the University of Technology, and the company. And that relates to a whole variety of issues, including disciplinary. We had one disciplinary situation that I can remember of, that where we had to pull the student out of the program. But if you think about it, we've placed in excess of 200 students, and if we had one disciplinary issue, I think that's a very decent track record. I think I've already spoke about this, so I'm not going to go into that. So some of the things we measure, how we measure the success of the program, is the overall student intake per cycle. And as I said, the demands down to 160 where we can only support 120. The number of students that complete their internship, that's an important thing for us. And let me explain that. I'm going to digress a little bit if you'd indulge me. Prior to starting the position I'm in at the moment, I used to run the KZN Tooling Initiative. And whilst I ran the KZN Tooling Initiative, we did a study, and on an apprenticeship program, the staying rate on an apprenticeship program at that stage was 13%. So that means for every 100 students that were enrolled in an apprenticeship program, only 13 completed the program. And there were issues as to why that happened, and we started to get that up to 80% at some stage. But I think that's why we want to measure it, is that we want to ensure that students that receive this funding complete it and graduate out of the program. And important for us is how many students are absorbed by the companies. And I said that this is happening, and there's graphs that we're going to get into now that will show how many students have been absorbed. So what you'll see here on this graph on the screen is in the 2014-15 cycle, we had a target of 100, and we actually placed 101 students. So we exceeded our target. In the next cycle, which is the one that's running at the moment and will be finished off in December or January, we had a target of 100, and we placed 108 students into industry. And I think it's important to tell you this, that as much as industry saw this as a freebie, and I say a freebie because we were paying for the students to be placed, there were some companies who saw such benefit in the students that they actually topped up what we were paying. So it wasn't the companies just looking for freebies. They were prepared to invest in the students as well. And on the current cycle, which we intend to start in January, our target is 120, and we're going to see how much we can stretch that target by. So from the first intake, I think most of you sitting in the room understand the graduation cycles and the completion cycles. So of the 101 students that we started off initially, 71 of those students have already finished their internship. And we expect that number to grow because we had a staggered approach in our first year. We started the program in June with a certain intake, then in July, then in August, and in September, and that's caused the problem in terms of us getting our numbers. The number for the 2015-16 cycle, there's a small number of 6, and that's mainly because there were some students who only required a P2, and we supported them to get their P2, and those were 6 students that have already completed on the program. So I think we spoke about graduation rate, 71 out of 101 already. But I think what the next slide is about is how many females are being supported or graduating from or creating employment for them in the program. And that's important. I think why it's important is in the science and engineering field, we've had this perception, and we have it to a large extent where it's a male-dominated environment. But from the gender split that you can see there, we have a fair amount of females who have been successful in the program, up to 39% female. And What you'll see in this one is a scary picture because we're at 39% females who are graduating and are successful in the program, but on our intake numbers, female students in the program only account for 18%. So they're actually a little bit more successful than the male students on the program, if you think about it. Maybe I'm understating that. In terms of geographical split of where the students are placed in the country or where the companies are, you'll see that Gauteng is probably, is the biggest number, 41%. KZN, 28%. And we've had a massive program in KZN, which is linked to the 1,064 locomotive build program, where the demand for students has been high. The Western Cape, 16% with some good absorption rates. Eastern Cape 8%, Free State 4%, and the Northwest Province 3%. So as you can see, the program is placed in, well, what we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 9 provinces. So, you know, we hope to grow it into other provinces as well. I'm going to try and, so you can't see that very well, so I'm just going to read out the numbers for you, if I can make that a little bit bigger. What you can see there is that one of the aims of the program is how do we support previously disadvantaged groups to ensure that the engineering environment or the placement of science and engineering students is creating this environment where we are breathing new blood into industry. And you'll see from the stats on the screen that 86% of the students that we have placed are of African or black origin, 2% colored, 10% Indian, and 2% white. So it's actually talking to the previously disadvantaged. And I don't know if Busi's got the figures, but a lot of the students that we supported come out of rural areas, come out of townships, and get put into the mainstream economy to understand how they can become part of the mainstream economy. I'm not going to go through this now because these are a whole variety of testimonials from companies and students of what they've done. But so let's let this roll now. What you're going to see are a whole lot of pictures of students at their actual environment that they've worked in companies. And you'll see that they're working on real projects, real situations where they're getting proper experience and proper exposure. This is a company called Infuyu Projects based in Gauteng. They manufacture a whole variety of electronic systems and inverter systems. So there's a lot of electrical and electronic engineering students there. But they also manufacture doors for trains and the automation of doors for trains. So those are the 4 students that are placed at Infuyu Projects. And what's happening now is that we're finding that some of the students that we were placing are getting involved in R&D projects. So we had a project running at the University of Cape Town with Hydrogen South Africa. And we placed, I think it's 4 or 6 students at that project. What they actually are learning is a new technology that is being developed in the country. The development of hydrogen fuel cells. They're learning the systems that go with hydrogen fuel cells, the R&D processes, the new technologies that will be implemented linked to hydrogen fuel cells. So the students are not just getting involved in mainstream manufacturing, but in R&D projects as well. And we're finding more and more demand for those kind of environments because the University of Western Cape Town asks for further students this year to be involved in those R&D projects. Also, what's happening is that some of our suppliers who supply technology interventions for us have asked for students because they use the students in a variety of environments. So for instance, we've had about 10 students on the program who were involved with lean manufacturing implementation. Those were industrial engineering students. So effectively for us, the program has been successful. The DST has found benefit in the program. They're looking to fund it even further. And hopefully we, in the future, will be able to support students below the universities of technology and students at the higher levels from the universities of technology so that we can get the right skills for industry into industry. Thank you.
The University of Johannesburg. Rethink, reinvent.